everyone. Welcome back to my channel. Today I have with me a very special guest, the Clara Podcast, which is straight from the islands of Puerto Rico. Welcome. I'm glad to have you here. So, as my viewers and as you know, I'm not Puerto Rican. I am Dominican American. However, I do have, subscribers of various backgrounds, and I do have some that are Puerto Rican as well as Puerto Rican American. And I know I do sometimes touch on, Latino topics that are not just Dominican stuff. So I'm glad to have you on here and offer the perspective of someone that's actually, on the island. So again, welcome.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Yeah. So do you just want to give us like just a brief background of what your channel is about? I know that the videos are all in Spanish, right?
Yeah, we produce. The idea was to create like this channel that makes um, history and comedy all together, and really we could use offer a version of how we see history and really like the little pieces that don't tell us in school. Because like when we learn history in school, it's a very like saturated, quick version. They go over all the details that we think it was like juicy because my partner at the time, he's a history major and I'm a political science major. So we find like the importance in those little details of who was and what influenced such things. So we really wanted to have that podcast that you could use like, hey, you want to listen about Grito de Lares, you want to listen about different little topics, and you could just look it up in YouTube and find those. Because if you're really interested in any Puerto Rican history, you won't. There's really not a podcast or something that's very practical and just really comprehensive out there. So we wanted to have that, and just because we're young, we have that, we have the like the we're in connect with the youth, we have the comedy, we know the memes per se, so we can use all of that, we mix that with our different like knowledge of history, and we make comedy out of it, so it's easier for to people are able to listen to it. So that's what we wanted to create, and
Yeah.
that's the idea.
Yeah, that's great. That's a really good idea. And I do think a lot of us younger people are trying to learn more about the histories of either our countries or our parents' countries. In my case, my parents' country. So that's great. So for any of you out there that are Spanish speakers or can understand Spanish, definitely check out their channel. So for today's topics, I first want to give a shout out to one of my viewers. I think you're subscribed. You know who you are, but you were the one that suggested to me that I interview La Clara Podcast. So thank you to you, and you also provided me with some different talking points. So thank you for that. So I'm going to start off with some of the historical topics, and then we'll move on to the certain topics pertaining to what's going on today, like current issues going
Mhm.
on in Puerto Rico.
Of course.
So I first want to start off with El Grito de Lares.
Hmm.
Some of my subscribers know about that. This happened in 1868,
Yeah.
and from what I read, this was the first revolt against Spanish rule, because at this time Puerto Rico was still a colony, correct?
Yes, that's correct. We were a Spanish colony all the way into the 1898. We're gonna talk about that later, but yeah. So to put in context, like everybody's having the revolutions in the beginning of the century. Like by 1920, most of Latin America is independent. So we had that perspective too. In the 30s, you had some people tried to do it, but somebody was always snitching, so they failed. Like I believe when I looked up, there was like two revolts before that, or tried to be revolts by priests, different type of people, and like they were just arrested before, and like they just fled the island. So in 1968, we can sort of like for first time we proclaim our identity as like, yeah, we are Puerto Ricans, and like we have the right to become a nation, and that's what really happened in Little Letters if we look at it from a social aspect. Um, it was everybody was pretty much pissed at Spanish Crown because we were promised like reforms from the beginning of the century. You have Cuba and Puerto Rico. We pretty much had the same treatment, but because of that, since we were a smaller island, we got like the cold shoulder, and we were not really that important as a colony. Thereby, there's a lot of like we wanted just special laws that really were practical to us, so we could manage our land better and have like like less taxes in the sugarcane industry. That way we could just function better as a whole society. So you have in the 30s, because of the revolutions, Spain starts to like, yeah, we're gonna have special laws, and over you have different changes between the liberals and the conservatives in the government, and that never happens. So you had those people, which is like Emilio Betances, who's a doctor. You have Augusto Maria de Ostroff, which is also like a philosopher. You have people from the elite, pretty much. That's very important. Is the elite that's philosophically thinking of liberation, thinking we have to get rid of the crown so we can make more money, so we can have our freedom. And that's what really happens in 1868. The revolution was officially set to September 29th in 1868 in Camoy. The thing about Camoy, it was strategically placed in between two of the biggest bases, military bases in Puerto Rico. So they were going to start from there so they could divide the forces and easily, have a better conquer of the island. What happens is September 30th, no, September 20th, I'm sorry, you have a snitch, and then he tells the authorities what happened. So they're like, hey, they're going to do a revolution on the 29th. So the revolutionists find out that there's a snitch, so they rush it to the 23rd. The thing is, Emilio Betances was coming to Puerto Rico with the weapons and the army, and he was stuck in in St. Thomas actually when this happens. So they actually just are like, it's a Venezuelan, like the leader, like military, is a Venezuelan landowner who just sympathize with the ideas of Hamilton Betances, because you have like liberalism going on. So you like Simon Bolivar, Washington, they were all liberals, and Betances was also liberal because they were against the monarchy. So you have the sympathizers, like you have mercenaries in the mix. You had like slaves fighting with machetes, all trying to get their freedom and just trying to actually start the revolution. But because they don't have the support, they're only around 300 people. They get crushed by the army in the morning after. So the revolution, the Republic of Puerto Rico, only lasted 4 hours in this case. Actually, yeah. So they were it's actually it's quite ironic when you look at it from a cultural aspect, because you have liberals, if you're looking from a historic context, they're mostly Protestants, and actually since we're talking about a place that's Catholic, going against the rule will be also a Protestant move. But they have a mass in the morning before they go on to fight. So you begin to see the different aspects. It's we can claim revolution and we can claim this, but our identity is still Catholic and Puerto Rican. So you begin to see the forging of our identity of what we become eventually.
That's so interesting. It seems because something similar happened in DR as well, where you had people that were on the side trying to fight for liberation from the Spanish crown, but you still had other people that wanted to remain, that wanted that attachment to remain there. So it was an external conflict with Spain, but there's also that internal conflict.
Yeah.
Between the sympathizers and the ones that wanted.
Yeah, definitely, and it's a lot of what benefits you, because the people who if you're more wealthy and well connected to the Spanish government, you're like, I don't need a revolution. I'm fine the way I am. What are they doing? So I think it's important to remark, that the ideas came from the elite, but at the end of the day, everybody will manifest from it, and everybody will benefit from it, and that's very interesting. And another topic that we talked about and we wanted to mention is the Antillean Confederation, which yeah, because it goes hand in hand, so you have Betances, which actually Betances is a very interesting figure, because he's actually even more known and venerated as a politician in the Dominican Republic than he is here. And that's something very interesting, yeah. And that's because after that he goes to the Dominican Republic. He spends a lot of time between the Dominican Republic and France, since the Dominican Republic already at this time is liberated, so it becomes a hub for philosophers like him. So is France. You have the French Revolution, so everybody goes to France to learn about what to do with the Republic and how it works, and all these ideas just fusion right there. So the Antillean Confederation was the manifestation for us, the Caribbean version of liberalism and our ideas, because you have people like Jose Martin, which is the Cuban revolutionary, and you have Gregorio Luperón, which is the Dominican revolutionary, and then Betances and Angelio, and they all had the same commotion. That's we have so much in common, culturally wise, we have the same ethnic mix, everything. We have the same. At this time, we have the same enemies and we have the same friends. So it only seemed obvious, if we're gonna survive, it's better if we survive together. So that was the idea, like we have to liberate all three islands so we can all become a one superpower, like our confederation. And you see that also with the in New York. In New York, you had the Cuban Revolutionary Party, and that was the like that was the civil wing that was dealing with the United States to get support with the war in Cuba and all these things. And there was a section that was for Puerto Rico, and in the manifest you see that they say we want liberation for Cuba, but also for Puerto Rico. So you begin to see those sentiments of like like forging us together, and we have to do this together. We see it also in the flag. Literally, that's why it was designed in New York because of that reason.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So I guess that so that idea, did it ever really form into anything concrete?
No, unfortunately not, because like Martin dies, Betances dies. Puerto Rico was never, it never became independent at that moment, so it was impossible. Like logistically and philosophically, it was just impossible to get. And then after that, the idea just kind of left there. The only one who picks it up is this Puerto Rican politician in the early 1900s, whose name was Jose Diego. He's a very interesting figure too. And then in his last days, like he became in the when he was under Spain, he used to advocate for autonomy. So once the United States invades, he switches over and he's like, we need full independence. And in the last days, what he does, he goes visit Cuba, he goes visit Dominican Republic to kind of like get that sentiment back up, because he thought that maybe getting that energy and that support from these republics at this point, we could actually gain some independence and maybe get that sentiment back up and get people like thinking, yeah, we could do it if they're there for us. And he was really the last one to think about it and try like do something about it. In the independence circles here, we talk a lot about it. It's a very common idea. It's like, yeah, only if but then now you have the things that Dominican Republic, it will be a U.S. ally, and then you have communist Cuba. And it's like, what do you do there? Like, do you have to like overthrow both governments and have like a brand new government that's like the Confederation Antilles, or are we gonna have like a communist regime for all three islands? Like, what are we gonna do? And a lot of ideas just like, and a lot of technicalities become on and on and on that just I think makes it a lot impractical to think about today. And for first instance, because before we have to think about like, what are we going to do in Puerto Rico? We can become independent under the Confederation, and then all of just questions can pop out, and just it becomes really complicated if we think about it for today.
Yeah. So that brings me on to my next point. What person?
Mhm,
Pedro Albizu Campos. So I read that he lived from 1891 to 1965, and he was
mhm,
also a leading figure as far as Puerto Rican independence is
mhm.
concerned. So can you give us like a little background about him and like what he did and what his role was?
Well, okay, so he's born into, so his mom is, I believe she was an ex-slave or a servant. She was from African descendants, and she don't just really lower class. His dad, his father is this landowner, Catalonian, I believe. No, no, Basque. Yeah, Albizu is Basque, not Catalonian. So he's this like wealthy Basque um landowner, and this lower class African woman. So he's actually never recognized by his father into high school, I believe. So yeah, he because his mom dies when he's like 4. It's really tragic story. His aunt begins to take care of him, I believe, for his grandma, someone in the family, and then he grows up very poor. He enters schools in around age 10, and then he finished elementary, middle school, and high school in like 4 years. It was crazy. So yeah, he gets a scholarship by the his principal was a Mason. So he talks to the Ponce Lodge, and then they give him a scholarship so he can go to Vermont University. In Vermont University, he starts studying chemical engineering. But then he also gets influenced by Indian independence and Irish independent movements that were happening there. So yeah, like actually he helped draft the Irish Constitution. Like that's when, yeah. Because after that he goes to Harvard, and in Harvard he begins like really goes into it. Like like he like if there's this book that's really good, it's, like if you're interested in like Puerto Rican nationalism and him himself, it's called War Against All Puerto Ricans. Became quite famous in the last couple of years. And then he talks about like how he's actually giving a speech in Boston about the Irish independence, And this like British sir, like like of the dynasty, he's like, that's like one of the best, like that's the best speech I ever heard about Irish independence coming from coming from a British man. So it's he already becomes like this like pseudo intellectual and this like just big thinker. He goes up to speak 6 languages, including like Asian Greek and Asian Latin is two of those. He gets he becomes a chemical engineer. I think he gets a PhD on that, and then he also has a law degree from Harvard and literature degree, a military history degree. So he's a very prepared person. Like right out of Harvard, he gets offers to be a diplomat, like a judge in the Supreme Court, and all these things, and he regrets it. Like because at this point he's settled. He's like, we have to have the Puerto Rican independence, and that's his view. He's completely set on the Puerto Rican independence, and that's what he has to do. He comes back, and as he practices his profession as a lawyer, but he just serves poor people because that's like that's what he feels. So he lives in Ponce, in like one of the like the most ghetto and poor neighborhoods, and he's just the lawyer of the people, and like people can't pay him with money, so they give him food, they give him chickens, bread, whatever they can find to pay him, and that's how he gets through. But like this whole time, you think, oh, he's just wasting his time, but he's not. He's creating a reputation. He's creating a reputation that he's a man of the people, that he's willing to like sacrifice himself, sacrifice his family for the people, and the motherland comes first, and there's nothing above that. And that's what he's doing this whole time. He's just writing, he's publishing for different newspapers. And in 1930, he becomes part of the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party. The Puerto Rican Nationalist Party is an effect of the party that Jose Diego, the guy that we spoke of. So like Jose Diego was part called Partido Unión. So you have like Luis Muñoz Rivera, who's like Luis Muñoz Marin's father, and you have Jose Diego, and they're like the big guys there. And like Luis Muñoz advocates for statehood, and Jose Diego advocates for independence, but it all has to come from the people. It's not a forced relationship like it is today, but it also has to come from people. That's really what unites the party. Jose Diego dies, so it just becomes a pro-statehood party, and from those people that want independence, the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party is born. So you had that transition of mentalities going on into like we have to look for complete independence, and that's when the Nationalist Party is born. And Pedro Albizu comes in. They see his potential, and people say that this is a good thing, but I come to the conclusion that they just really like trying to like push him out of the movement, and he goes around Latin America trying to get support. But at the same time, it's just like just let him be over there. He's just traveling, like nobody's gonna listen to him over there. But he comes back, and he actually like becomes the person of the party, because like he's just eager to it. Like he's just like, I know what I have to do. He becomes the person of the party, and that's in 1930. And in 1932, he goes to elections. He's like, let's just try the election path, and he actually fails to become senator. He felt like just becoming a senator, and Luis Muñoz Marin is actually become senator, and he didn't even live in that island. He came straight from Greenwich and just traveled over here, and then he became the senator and took his spot. And the thing about this election is, they did this thing back in the day that they would just recount votes if they had a doubt about it. So they say that they tried to recount those votes, and from 12,000 it came down to 5,000 from the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party. So there's a lot of iffy there. So they probably could have won that election, but they didn't. So at this point, he's becoming more radicalized. Not by just what he sees, but his experiences. He's like, I tried the electoral path. I didn't work. I'm being part of a political movement. Within the system, but it's not working. So this is in the 30s. In 34, there was a long sugar strike, sugar workers strikes. So like they were organizing against the sugar cane companies, because when the United States invades, they completely, the whole economy becomes like a monopoly for the U.S. Like we went through a hurricane that really like took like 90% of our agriculture and just destroyed it. So from depending on coffee, fruits, and sugar, they said you're only going to produce sugar. So that creates a crisis in itself. And then the sugar cane workers are just paid like a quarter a day. So it's just really bad conditions. the same, like, you see, like, it's just more obvious the colony status, because like literally like all the owners are foreigners, and they don't know them speak Spanish, and it's like, like, I'm working my ass off on what's going on here. So they go on strike, and then Pedro Campos, like, he already has that fame of being people that, like, the amount of the people, and he has the education, and like, he not only just he brings his political rhetoric, but he also uses Catholicism. He reads the Bible for the people, and we're talking about the 30s, like, you have a very Catholic, like, population. They really believe in the Bible, and like, they really believe in that word. So using that and contrasting with the politics that he has, and using as contrast the reality they're living on, really catches into people and really, like, gets a popular feeling behind him. So he does that. He actually, like, I believe it was Riggs, Colonel Riggs, actually is sent down from Nicaragua. He was living with the Sandinistas at the time. He's sent over here to deal with the nationalist issue, because it's costing a lot of money. So he sits down with Albizu Campos and actually offers him to donate $150,000 to the party, and offer him in 1934 to win the election, and within 10 years he will become governor, as long as he just drops the strikes completely. He says, Puerto Rico is not for sale, at least not from me. So, and he leaves. He's just like, he's a stand-up, right? Like, like, I still can't find a flaw in him. Like, he's just like, the perfect revolutionary, like, like, just like, it's morally wrong. I'm not going to do it. I don't care if I die. It's just the right thing to do. And he just has that heart to, like, it's just his character. And it's very interesting, like, Pedro Campos, because that's what a lot of nationalist people say. It's just like, it's not what he used to say. It's just he lived the way he used to say, "Paris valor and sacrificio," valor and sacrifice. And he just didn't say it. He walked through it. Like, it's like, you have to sacrifice your family for this, and my my family has more value than this, and my people have more value than this. And he lived through it. He lived that model, and that was it. So you have that, and then in 1936 he gets arrested for conspiracy. Well, like, conspiracy to, like, like, defuse the U.S. government, because he's a revolutionary at this moment. He's not mounting guns or anything, but he still has a speech, and you're living in the 30s, so anything can go. So he gets arrested, and then he's sent to jail, and then that's in 36. So in 1937 you had the Ponce massacre, which was supposed to be this legal, peaceful protesting from the party. You had the Cadetes of the Republic, of the Cadetes de la República, Cadetes of the Republic, which was like the military wing for the party, and they were supposed to have a peaceful march in Ponce and just, like, protest, to get Pedro out of jail. But what happens is, that morning, the Colonel Riggs calls the major and says, you have to cancel it. Like, they can't, like, they had the permissions and everything, they had, like, they had a legal protest, like, that was going to happen, and they canceled the protest the same morning. The party decides to go on with the protest, and that ends up in being a shootout. The police just start shooting at the protesters. Yeah, so, like, you got I believe it was up to a dozen people dead and hundreds injured, and including kids, women. They didn't care. You started shooting. Like, they had thumbs, like, they used Tommy Thompsons for this, and just, like, a target that's not moving in front of you. So you can mind the logistics of it. And then they say it was an accident, and then they actually did an investigation. They consider it a massacre, but nobody, like, at that time, the United States just covered it up, and nobody got responsible for it. So the colonel or the major, the police, nobody was responsible for this. So in 1947, he comes back to Puerto Rico. That was in 37. 10 years after pass, he comes back to Puerto Rico. And the party is not the way that it used to be. They went from 10,000 cadets to 1,000 cadets. So that is a lot. But the idea of revolution is still in his head. And for 1952, you had the ELA, which is the status that we're under today legally, the free associated state. That was going to be implemented for 1952. So in 1947, he says, we're going to plan the revolution for that time. That was supposed to happen within the span of 5 years. And then at that time, he just kept giving speeches. He was meeting secretly with his leaders. He was trying, getting arms, doing little robberies there and there to get more money or weapons against the army and stuff like that. But in 1950, they arrested some of the leaders, and one of those leaders was the leader of the Puerto Rican, I mean, not the San Juan like committee, the Puerto Rican committee, the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party committee in San Juan, like the leader of that committee per se. He gets arrested, he gets tortured, and he snitches in the plans. So we have a snitching partner if you haven't noticed, but yeah. But so he's forced to Russia. Of course, he's like, the feds are coming after me. If I don't do it now, we're just gonna get killed or arrested. So he's like, now or never. So you have a series of attacks happening on October 30th, and he's mostly known for Grito de Lares, which in Jayuya, like my great uncle was actually part of this. He was the first one who died in the revolution. And then they took Jayuya. They actually were able to take Jayuya. They burned down the mail. They cut down all the telephone lines. They burned down the police station, and declared the Second Republic of Puerto Rico. The thing, when you declare on the Treaty of Paris, or when you declare yourself independent, you have 3 days to hold fire, and then you have right to peace talks. That's what the Irish did. That's the tactic. You proclaim a republic, and you just hope you can have guerrilla warfare for 3 days, and you can actually have conversations, peace talks, and go through a peaceful process. So you don't have to go through an outright war against the United States. So that was what's going on there. Like they attacked like Ponce, they attacked the San Juan, they attacked different points in the island, and Jayuya was the big one. That's where they could do, in Jayuya is like in the middle of the island where there was mostly country people. They were mostly nationalists, so they had the sentiment. So they just declared that was like their area percent, declared the area there and the republic there. But in places like the San Juan, they just sent like squads of 4 or 5 people to hit up like the government's palace, the government's mansion, the Supreme Court, and different areas like that to just show like, yeah, we mean business. And then when they were pulling up to the government's mansion, they exchanged shots, but they put the UN flag there, and that was yeah, because they were trying to get attention that was indeed a colony, because that was not yet quite a topic. But in 1953, what happens is that Puerto Rico, since it's under that state of being ELA associated with the United States, is actually not considered a colony at all by the UN. So by doing these different acts, it was really just trying to get attention from the international community and the international. Everybody used to come. Yeah, the United States is a colony, and it's Puerto Rico, and we're in the colony, and we want to be independent, and we're okay with it. So that was what all these really attacks were going on, and he gets arrested for that. In 1952, we still have the ELA, and then in 1953, he's indulged by the governor of Puerto Rico, Luis Muñoz Marin. But in 1954, by that time, he's never let free. Like, he's indulged, but they never let him free. So Lolita, Lebron, they go into shoot on Congress. I'm sure that's like big, in 1954, they shoot up Congress, and it was to get attention from the international community. Yes, we're a colony. Yes, we are a colony. We're pissed. We want a republic. We want our national heroes out. We are a people. That's all affirming our identity, and that's very important. Legal pretext. Because that's what really we're based around. Like that legal pretext that we are colonized. So we need a decolonization process. Because in the 60s, you already had the decolonization committee. But this was all happening in the 50s too, with the Soviet bloc, and as Africa became more liberated, you have more countries joining the UN, and they could put more weight into it. So that's all just not a tactic of like we need to shoot up because we're gonna actually win, but it's more for just attention and making some points here. So that's what happened with him, and so that happens and then he's put back in jail, of course. Cliche. Those next 10 years, he's just like treated badly. Like he was actually like proved to be tortured with radiation, and that leads to several strokes. And you can look up his pictures, and it's just like his foot are swollen. In 1964, he's indulged, and he's living here in Puerto Rico. In 1965, he dies. So he's like I told you, like morally, he did everything right. Like if you're coming from a revolution standpoint, like, and then the ends means the ends. Yeah, how do you say it in English? Sorry, the ends. Los. Like the ends means the means, or
By the means.
Yeah, that's what justified. Yeah, so if you had the mentality already, like if you're not morally saying like killing is wrong because the revolution, like if you had the mentality, like he did everything right, he never sold out, he got the education, he did it all for the people, and that's very like the character that he takes on, and people like he's glorified because of that. At least for the people who believe in independence. If you're for statehood, you probably think of him as terrorist. But for everybody else who like thinks like no, he was actually like he tried to go to relations. He tried everything. He exploited everything possible, and it just led to revolution, and that led to his death. But he lived on with that. And that's what made him like what he is.
Yeah. Wow, that is quite the story.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I just realized too, I went to talking about him and I totally missed to ask about the actual US invasion.
Yeah, I realized that when like we were talking about Jose de Diego, I was like, wait, we were missing a step here.
Yeah, which of course this was all in response to
Yeah.
that. But I mean, if you just want to just really quickly touch on the U.S. invasion of 18.
Well, yeah, sure. So we get invaded in 1998. That is a part of the Hispanic American War. Where Cuba is claiming their independence, the U.S. is backing that, Spain is fighting against that, and we're put into that because the United States had their eye of us on us for a while. Actually, like the whole 19th century, like all of our like most of our exportation in sugar goes to the United States. So they see their economic potential, and then they take advantage of the situation and invade us. The irony, like this is the thing that you have to understand, about how liberalism works and stuff like this, because since the United States was this democratic capitalist power, and that's what like Simon Bolivar, Ramon Botan said, all these liberals want to do the same thing. They actually like the revolutionary the Puerto Rican section in the Cuban Revolutionary Party actually facilitates the invasion, thinking that they're gonna give us like independence and like democratic rights, and they actually give them maps on how to invade Puerto Rico, and they do that. And then we get in return we get 2 years of military dictatorship. So yeah, into 1990, yeah, because like between 1898 and 1990, we were under the rule of the United States Army. It wasn't a civil government in 1990, which is the Fort Jones, no, yeah, Forker Law, and you have the Jones Act in 1917, which is what gives us our. That's what. Okay, so it's 3 stages of like Puerto Rico under the U.S. So the first stage, like I mentioned, like 4 stages, I say. Yeah, sorry. The first stage is the military dictatorship. Then you have from 1990 to 1997, you have a very controlled government by most of the positions in the legislative branch are chosen by the United States or by the governor, which is the governor is appointed by the United States Congress and President. So it's all chosen by the United States. In 1917, we get more changes with more influence of like Puerto Ricans in the House of Representatives and the Senate. So that's where change started to happen, and we also get our citizenship, like the U.S. citizenship, because from 1990 to 1997, we're still Puerto Rican citizenships, but that didn't mean anything because we weren't citizens of anything. We didn't have a state. We didn't have anything. So that was like we were in that weird limbo, like. So that's what happened during the invasion. And as a result of that, we have the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party and everything that happened.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. So as a result of all that, okay, so
Yeah.
Pedro Albizu Campos comes into the picture. So fast forwarding now back to the 20th century, we have Los Machateros.
Yeah.
From what I looked up, they were also called El Ejército Popular Boricua.
Mm-hmm. So the
Okay.
the thing with the names, it's a practical thing. Like when there were revolutionary cells. So like cells work small numbers, and the point is for less people to know each other from within the cell, the better. So there were two main groups: this Fuerzas Armadas de Liberación Nacional, which is U.S. based, so all the U.S. operations function under that name, and then Ejército Popular Boricua was the Puerto Rican wing. So like everything that other operations happening locally happened under that name. Collectively, they were referred as Los Macheteros.
Okay. Did they like go around with machetes or something? Like what?
Well, the macheteros, so like during the invasion of the Puerto Rican invasion. So a lot of Puerto Ricans joined the National Guard, the Spanish National Guard ranks, just to fight off the invasion. And then in the Grito de Lares, and this time people, poor people didn't have rifles. They picked up the machete, and that was their weapon. So that's what it's like the mentality of like we don't care how small, how poor we are. We just macheteros. We're just gonna fight for what we live. So it was like kind of like that myth of like that Puerto Rican warrior that has like nothing else to lose, but like just he only has to achieve freedom, and the only weapon that he has is a machete. So that's what he goes about.
Yeah, it seems a common theme throughout many countries that a lot of times it's like the poorest people who seem to have the most of that revolutionary
Well,
spirit.
yeah, because they're the bottom of it. They're the people on the top are benefiting from that. And that's like there were like for example, in the Nationalist Party you have it was a more local capitalism, cooperativism influenced by Jesuit ideas and like center left ideas, but the macheteros were straight up Marxist Leninists, and they were like, Filiberto Rios was sponsored by the Cuban intelligence. Like this was a group sponsored by Cuban intelligence, and it was supposed to have that guerrilla. And if like Marxist Leninism is based on the idea of like class struggle, so you had that mentality, and that was influenced about. And that's what he tried to do. Filiberto Rios was like, create that popular sentiment of class struggle and for people to rise up. And something interesting about that too is in the jails, like you had Loñetas, which is like a gang site that's only like for jail, like for prisoners. And he was actively like advocating for independence. Like the macheteros supported the struggle inside jail and like the having more rights, and then these strikes and they did different things supporting the macheteros from within. And Carlos La Sombra, which is the leader of that gang, he actually, when he gets shut up and like he dies, the only thing he has to defend is a newspaper called Claridad, which Claridad is the newspaper for the macheteros and the independence movement, and that's the only thing he has to defend himself. So that just goes to show like how enrooted the class struggle was into, and how practical it was that they went to the streets and like they picked up gangs and they picked like they were just trying to advocate and just try to influence as much people as they could that were affected by the system, and they took up on that. So yeah, so they were mostly active in the 70s and 80s, like I mentioned. Well, I told you that we didn't mention that in the 70s and 80s they were mostly active, and they were just really urban warfare. They were mostly based on putting bombs in different places. They killed different cops, and just they in the 80s they did this big robbery in Wells Fargo, and they stole 7 million. They're mostly known for that. And yeah, in 1981 they also attacked like the local air base, like where the international airport is at. There's also an air base next to it, and they broke into it and they managed to blow up 10 different aircrafts, costing the U.S. Air Force $45 million. So they were based on those tactics, those very going in and out, not very having an army versus army tactics. So it was just really guerrilla and just trying to get that common sentiment. And people worked in different ways for the guerrilla, whether it be in the newspaper and different civil organizations or being actively part of a terrorist cell. But they gather up to like 5,000 people. Some people say 12,000 people. Some people say so. They gather up a lot of people under that slogan, under the mechanism. I personally know two of them, and they're just really like straight up good people. And one of them, like he was the one who used to do the glasses for Filiberto. And then if you go to his house, you see a lot of artworks that's like pro-independence. And I think was to cover up a lot of the operation. They just gifted each other things so they couldn't be like a legal, a legal trace of I'm giving you this and I'm selling you this. And so the FBI couldn't mess with them to that direction. But they're still all under like strict FBI investigation, and they all were followed around, all that stuff.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. So from everything you've covered up to now, just kind of covering the history of Puerto Rico, there have obviously been many nationalist Puerto Ricans
Mhm.
that have tried over and
Mhm.
over again to, gain the independence of Puerto Rico, but it just never seems to fall through.
It just never happens. Yeah,
Uh,
someone. Yeah.
okay, so now that we've covered a lot of the history, I want to move on to some of the current topics. And one of the topics that has been brought up on my channel a few times as well is how people feel about statehood versus independence, especially now after Trump. I think, especially after like Hurricane Maria, a lot of us over here saw the response that the U.S. had with Puerto Rico, and it was just not cool. So,
Yeah.
how would you say most Puerto Ricans right now on the island feel about that?
Well, the thing is, people want change. People they realize that the things are happening, that how we're doing things is not working out.
Yeah.
The thing about thinking just exclusively about those two options is how are you going to get there, what's going to be the process. We economically, our structure is horrible. Like 130,000 people, yeah, 130,000 people are employed by the government versus agriculture only employs 10,000 people. So you see, yeah, yeah. So like like you have, and just like the same way, 120,000 people are employed by just retail stores when you have 30,000 people employed by professional services. So you have these fundamental problems. I think if we're gonna talk about anything, it has to be about the economy first. You know, but trying to answer your question, I think the people are leaning more maybe a little bit towards independence or just more of that route of autonomy, see how we can just solve things here. But there's a lot of questions about that because we know that the Puerto Rican government is corrupt. We know that the US doesn't like us. So if we become independent, we're gonna have the same corruption, the same people. It's gonna be worse because there's the FBI can't lock them down. So they're just gonna go out crazy. So at the same time, but it's like, the state is just not gonna happen. Like it's a deal, sure. We become part of the United States, we get more money, a lot of problems get solved, but really we're left with the same thing. We're left, and it's just simply not gonna happen like that because it hasn't happened in the last 100 years because the United States doesn't want it to. What's gonna make it happen now?
Right.
And that's the thing. Like I think people like with the march and different things, like like people have gotten more aware of like the problems and we have to do something about it. But I think people are also just looking for a leader, looking for someone to unite them, to have a slogan that actually is practical and works for people, that has a plan. Hey, we're just not going to become independent, but within this, you have a plan of 10, 20 years of we're going to have this development and we're going to get this autonomy by this year. And with this, we're going to do this and try to solve those fundamental problems and also the colonial problems. But that fear of how that's gonna work out and who's gonna have the say in what of how it's gonna get done, that's what strikes fear. And that's why you can I couldn't really say and pinpoint a sentiment that people have because both of those options implicate a lot of questions, a lot of factors that can go different ways, and that can change the opinion of people because people want the good change, and that either both can go really good or really bad depending on how it takes power. So I would like to think that people are leaning more towards independence because they see that the treatment of Trump, they see that that's just not going to be an option, that's not practical, and that's not going to happen anytime soon. And they can start actually building a future based on independence, but the path towards there, because it's not going to happen. Like I'm a nationalist, I believe in independence, but it's not going to happen overnight. There's a lot of issues that we have, social issues, political issues that we have to solve first before we even think about getting independence. So that's actually practical at the end of the day.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so a third option that I guess maybe some people are considering or
Mhm.
maybe they thought about is Puerto Rico maybe becoming an autonomous community of Spain. Is that
Yeah,
noticed?
that's a small, very small movement. Like most people don't know about it. I know it because I'm into politics and I know like every little movement that's out there. But most people don't really talk about it. It's not very popular because the sentiment of Spain is it's just like, what are you talking about? Like why? Like Spain. Like didn't we had that issue last century? Did we talk about that already? Like I thought we dealt with that already.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, like that's mostly like like people who are mostly have Spanish descendants, and they see because culturally, and that happens in Latin America. We're still Catholic, we still speak Spanish, so you still have those traces back to Spain. But at the same time, we have, because of history and because we have the Taino influence, we have this African influence that also forged a new identity that's based on today. So those people that still hold on to more of those Spanish values, they might they might relate to those movements, and they think about it. Oh, look, like practically we could be part of the European Union. But I don't talk about how Spain is actually treated as shit in the European Union, and it's it's a lot of times refer the Africa of Europe. It's just we're talking about a country that I see it as a Puerto Rican. It's they don't have anything to offer us at this point. They're not that superpower they were back in the day. The only thing that they could offer us is that entrance to the European market. But is it everything else? Our taxes going to be worth it when you have places like Catalonia fighting for independence right now because they put too much into the system and they don't get as much out. So they having that same issue. How are we going to know we're not going to just lead to that same route because it's not a good deal like the United States is for us? Because if you look at the numbers, if you look about all the money that the U.S. sends to us and how much is put into the Puerto Rican economy by the United States, and contrast that with all the money that's giving to taxes, Puerto Rican, the U.S. taking companies out, we're still not getting a good deal. That's still about $10 to $20 billion a year that's taking off our economy if you put those things into scale. And so, because that's what a colony is at the end of the day. It's not supposed to help the people in the colony. It's supposed to be helping the people, colonizing. It's supposed to make them rich. If it wasn't a good deal, we wouldn't be a colony in the United States. We would be a state or something else, or just independent right away. But it's a good deal there, and and you don't see anybody making a fuss about it here. So whatever, we're just gonna keep doing it. Yeah. So that's those people. I think they're looking for a desperate, alternative. And since, because, and those people are really there are us, in Spain, the party that they're tied to is called Vox. So it's this, it's kind of like the Republicans per se, this right wing, more conservative, and they're trying to influence politics in Latin America. I have heard of multiple of my friends and multiple people being approached to become part of it here in America, in the American continent where they used to have colonies, to try to make the Vox, Vox Puerto Rico, Vox Venezuela. There's actually a movement in Venezuela called Generación Nacional, and it's one of the big nationalist oppositions to the regiment, and they're actually tied with them too. So they're actually tied with the Vox, and they and it's very, very ironic because they try to be hardcore conservatives and just right wing, but they're getting sponsored by Israel and all those things, and you're what? Yeah, we recognize it's because it's that it's the Republican liberal mentality, it's which is kind of ironic to say, but when you think about it, liberals, they just economic freedom and these economic things, this political freedom, and that's what Republicans are trying to hold into, partly, having that economic freedom, the free market. And that's what the same thing you have in Brazil right now, with the right-wing government. He's right-wing, socially strong, but economically more freedom. And he recognizes Israel, and then Israel works for him, and they work for. So you have this, So you have that's the people they're relating to. So they don't really have the Puerto Rican sentiment, in my opinion, either. They don't. The local Puerto Rican is not thinking about that. We're thinking about, why is the minimum wage so fucking low? Why are we a colony? What are we gonna do? Why can't we trade with whoever we want? Why can't we vote for the president? Those things are what people care about, and their well-being. So, going back to Spain, I don't think it will solve any of those problems because they can't even solve them for themselves, And so.
Yeah, because what I hear lately is that they have not been doing very well economically.
And then the immigration crisis hit them hard. The government, and that's the thing. You have a left-wing government, and so they'll partake in just let's just take immigrants in because it's generally a good thing, and then they give those immigrants help, but then they just start taking funds from that was meant for their own people. So you have to prioritize there. Yeah, sure, like if we can, you come in, help, sure. Like that's at least how I see it. But first I have to make sure I'm okay. Make sure my people are good, everybody's doing good, and sure we can take immigrants in, because like that's really where your values should be at. It's like those are the people who put you into power in the first place, so you be loyal to them. So because of that, I don't think it's a practical thing, and more because like the ideological changes I will have with the party that they link to, because I don't believe in right-wing economics at all. I don't think it's practical, and I only think it helps one class of the population. I don't believe in that, So that sentiment is very small, and those people are related to them. Sorry.
That's fine. Okay. So the next topic I wanted to talk about was this whole thing that happened last year, Ricky Denuncia. I remember hearing about it. I briefly mentioned it in a video of mine. And this guy, he was a governor, right? Of Puerto Rico.
Yep, it was.
Said some very negative things
Yeah,
about people and
they.
protests, and they got him out of office. So you want to give us a little background about that?
Okay, so first, Ricky Rosselló, like his father was the governor in the late 90s. So that gives you something to think about. He actually was responsible of nationalizing the Puerto Rican telephone company. So that's one of he sold out the like one of the biggest. There was big protests about that because a lot of people were left without jobs. A lot of positions were eliminated, and they were just sold out to foreign companies. So that's when AT&T and all these companies came in, and they sold. So that's the type of guy you're dealing with. Ricky Rosselló essentially was put into the popular eye when he was in his youth, because he's like, people remember him for running over this lady with her kids while he was drunk in a golf cart and killed them. Yeah, and he got away with it because he was the son of the governor, of course. And yeah, so this same guy is the guy that wins the election in 2016. Apparently, yeah, because like the election itself is super fraudulent. Like I remember, because I was here during the election, I remember watching in the news that you have reports of Lugaro, which is the more progressive candidate. She was independent. A lot of her votes were like thrown out, and all of like votes were just given to people with already like marked voting for Ricky Rosselló. That came out in the news, and nobody did anything about it, and he just let it slide, and he became governor. So he becomes governor in 2016. 2017, Maria hits. Like it's horrible. It's people are left without electricity for months. Government is doing little about it. You have Trump, he does his fucking little show and nothing, so you have all these things going on, and then then find out pallets of just water stacks up, and they just left it there for people to die. So you have all these things adding up, because they find there were the supplies to help the people, and he did nothing about it. He just let it happen. Like he was responsible for this death, and that's how people see it. But he still left in office, in 2019, because that happened in 2017. So we still have to deal with. I have to make sure I have running water and electricity. I can't take this guy out of power right now. They weren't thinking about it, just trying to get something practical done. So in 2019, that happened in the beginning of summer, I believe. This group chat in Telegram gets leaked, and that's their famous group chat. And it's just him, talking shit about the people. Like there's people who he met. There was this big person. He talks about, oh, I'm in the fourth rotation around him still, and coming talking trash about women, different people, and that gets the people going. People say, oh, it's so stupid that it was over a group chat. But I would like to at least believe that it was really everything, that all of that summed up, the fact that we let him into power, the fact that he treated us like that, the fact that he let people die like that, all those sentiments add up. It's not. I think it was just the last drop in the glass. That was just triggering that group change. Like on top of that, he has the nerve to do this and not apologize. Just do it out there and just not care about it. So I believe the protest lasted up to 12 days. I believe it was almost 2 weeks. And this was every day, and they were just protesting the governor's mansion. And 2 days before I believe it was the same day that the biggest march done in a long time. It was they estimate it was 1 million people keep in perspective, there's up to 3.1 million people in Puerto Rico. So we're talking about a third of the population showing up to protest against the governor. So yeah, that happened during the day, and I remember he said there was going to do like a press conference or 4:30, 6:30. That never happened, and then he goes live like at 8 o'clock, 10 p.m., and he says he's done, like he's quitting. And and then after that, so like during those 12 days of protest, a lot of like people like that were working with him, the staff, Secretary of State, they're gone. So like when like it's the same kind of like logic like as when the president dies, it's the vice president and this the Secretary of State, but all those people in the line have already been fired or they just quit it. So they tried to do Pedrici because I believe he's the one that's in Congress right now. I forgot what. No, that was. I don't know what Pedrici gets into. I forgot what Pedrici gets into the picture, but he tries to take power. He saw like another guy from the same party, and it's just the same people. But he tries to take power constitutionally, and that doesn't happen. So Wanda Vasquez, which is the one that's in power now, she's the Department of Justice Secretary, and she's pleading as the governor. So it wasn't supposed to be like she's not a politician. She just she was what you call it, a prosecutor. She was a prosecutor, and she became like the general prosecutor in Puerto Rico, and that's her background. It's just a law, very like just arrest people. Like they say stories that she used to just go to. It's like, I don't care what has to be done. I want these guys in jail by tonight. Like I don't care. Like like we want to get this done, and we want to arrest this guy. I don't care what you have to make up. I don't care what you have to plan. I want them in jail. Like that was her attitude. Like by all means necessary. And then she takes him to power. And that's what we're living today, and that's our reality today, and yeah.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So, are the political parties in Puerto Rico, since Puerto Rico is still part of the U.S., are they also like Democrat and Republican, or do you guys actually have like your own political?
We have so there's Democrats and Republican politicians within the pro-statehood party. For example, Ricky Rosselló was a Democrat, and then Jennifer, the one that's in the Senate or the House of the Representatives, she's a Democrat. So, for example, and then so that's the pro-statehood party, that's the PNP, and that's what Rosselló was about. That's what Pedrici, that's what the current lady is on today. That's pro-statehood. So you could say they're like the right wing, the Republicans, more conservatives. That's the wing that you're looking for. But within the Partido Popular Democrático, which is the PPD, which is the Popular Party, those are the people that they led to the change, the reform that we're in today, to have to choose our own government, to have our own government here. That's what happened in 1952. Like that was seen as a reform, but really it was a reaction of like nationalists, because they were putting too much pressure. The U.S. says we have to reform the colony somehow, give more people the power, so it can discredit the pro-independence movement. You have nothing to worry about. You choose your own government. You choose you have rights, and that was trying to discredit, and it worked because we still own their colony, and there's a political party that advocates for it. So those are the people that are working within like the autonomy region. And you have some social democrats, like for example, Carmen Yulín, which is the mayor of San Juan. I'm sure you heard of her, I don't know, but like she's very vocal about her politics. She's an advocate for Bernie, for example. Like she was running, she was helping Bernie during the race right now. So that's like those are the party that you could say the PNP is the Republican, the Popular Party, Democrats. If you want to see if you want to polarize it and see like a left wing, right wing, the dynamic, but really you have both the Democrat and Republicans in the PNP, and you have Democrats and people who are pro-independence in the PPD, and you have the pro-independence party too. But those over the last elections, like they've been like, so like when this whole I'm not sure when they were formed, but like they were around for Pedro Campos, they were from the Macheteros, and they were always just like the civil wing. They're gonna stay, use the system. So they've been around for a while, but they always been a minority. They only get like 20%, 10%, while the two main parties are racing for 40, 50, 60%. to actually win the election. So those two parties are really just like the main parties, the ones that really get elected. They've been flip-flopping most of the time since they started. And really, like, they're just both pro-colony. So I don't really see a change within them because they don't try to have a fundamental change. They try to advocate for different economic policy of development, but they both advocate for foreign investment, not investing into our own economy to have actual economic development, so we can actually have money flowing around the economy, and that actually money could, like, make us grow and have a better life standard. So that's the main politics, and that's what people are. That's why I told you, like, people are looking for change. So, like, because Tiki happened, so they're looking for. They know, like, we have to stop what we're doing, and we have to stop voting for those two parties. But what quite thing to do after that? And that's why the protest just ended there. There wasn't really a mentality of doing something after. It was just, we're gonna take this guy out and that's it. There wasn't a set political agenda, like, we're gonna take this guy out, we're gonna start the revolution and start the republic or something like that. There wasn't, like, after that there has to be a set of things, and we have to get these things if we're gonna get somebody else in power. But there was never a thorough plan about that. And that's the thing too, because, like, even the pro-independence party is very fractured, because, like, you have more, like, radical communists, and you had just people who just want independence and be a capitalist democracy, and just, like, they're just, like, actual liberals, but they both want independence. Like, if, like, Grito de Lares, like, every year is celebrated by independence, like pro-independence sympathizers in the same plaza that the revolution started, and we have the mass that they had and everything. But when you go, you see, like, the nationalists in one corner, you see a socialist in one corner, and you see, like, the pro-independence party in one corner. You see, like, you see everybody knows each other, because you see, like, the older guys talking to each other and going around, and they all know that they're fighting for the same reason, but they don't get organized to have a same idea and have, like, a practical political agenda that can get us anywhere.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. All right. So, I have my last question here that I want to ask you. So, as I told you earlier, this is not related
Mhm.
to politics, but
Yeah.
it is how the native-born island Puerto Ricans feel about, American-born Puerto Ricans, New Yorkers, however you want to call them. It's something that I've seen come up a lot, even on my channel. I even had some requests that I do a video on it. So I had a few people give their opinions on it. But do you see, like, a disconnect, or that people from the island view Puerto Ricans here negatively? Like, what is your opinion on that?
Okay. So the thing that differentiates from people, like, you for me, is our identity, is how we raise, is how the behavior that we adapt, language that we speak, all the experiences that you have. And the thing with New Yorkers and contrast Puerto Ricans is first the environment. We live in an island. We live in, like, everybody here speaks the same language, and we all have that. The identity, the Puerto Rican identity, is always in constant development, and it's always in constant future, creation. Versus the United States, like, when you're in the United States, you have that mix. You have the mix of influences. You have the U.S. culture there, very present, and that's developing you. So because of, like, that very, like, logical basis, I can't see them as equal as Puerto Ricans. Like, I'll respect them as people and such. But when they try to just be like, oh, I'm Puerto Rican too, but their behavior, their culture is just an assimilation of the United States. Like, maybe they were raised by Puerto Ricans, but they act either as an Afro-American or as an Anglo, as a white American. Like, they adopt to that culture and that mentality. And, and that's really what they become. Just because you have a couple, you like arroz con gandules, and you have some Spanish words, and you have an abuelita, doesn't really make you a Puerto Rican. But it is that, I think, when you're born and raised here, like, for example, like, work itself, like, knowing that like, most jobs are just gonna be 725, and you do it to help your family, and you get a job at 13 years old, like I did. Like, most of us do. We still get jobs at an early age just to have our little thing, and you don't see that commotion over there. Like, that's really contrast, like, because you can get a job at McDonald's and make decent money, and maybe support yourself through that. And you can get, like, you can get those lower income jobs but still have a decent life, and here is very different to that. and just the way that we see the world, and we see that we are the center of our entertainment industries, yet our identity is not so much in politics and such. I think that creates really a person that's really unique to here, and that identity really contrasted with a person that just born in New York or Chicago, a big city, and is raised into maybe some Puerto Rican influences, but still really influenced by the by the U.S. system, by the education, the way of being, how they see different things, how they behave, all those different factors I think really influence into who you are and how you become to be. So that's really how I feel. Like I just I don't see them as Puerto Ricans because their identity and how the way they are is not really Puerto Rican like for me. It's just the way that it is. I have nothing against them personally, but it's just there's a big difference I think. And they're like, oh yeah, but it's the blood. It's like, but it's more than just the blood. Like you can be like, that's why I say too, like you can be a German born in Mexico, and you're born your whole life in Mexico, and just because you have that culture, you'll probably relate more to Mexico than Germany. Just because you like that's all regardless of your DNA, regardless of where your parents are from. But that's where and I feel like maybe a lot of them do want to like get identify as as Americans because they're like in that in between, and that happens a lot because maybe they do speak Spanish and they do like feel really related to the Puerto Rican culture. And in that case, I would say just like you have to then break away from all those like social connections that you have in the U.S. and then force yourself to like become a Puerto Rican. Like if you can't move here, if you can't learn the language, learn all those stories that that we all know, learn about like the different movements, and try to really if that's the way you feel and like you think that's your place, to do it, because that will be more accepted than like the person that just says speaks to you in English and has nothing to do with Puerto Rican, says, oh, I'm Puerto Rican because my great grandma was Puerto Rican. And that's how a lot of times they come off, because they come here and I think I'm just gonna be accepted by everybody. It's like, no, hold up. Like if you're speaking English and acting like just another arrogant gringo, we're gonna teach you like we're gonna treat you like another arrogant gringo. That's because that's what you become, because that's how you're acting here, And that's how we see it, like it's really how you approach the culture, how you approach us, because we know that people come up from outside to exploit us. We know that, we're aware. So we're jealous of how we are and what we are, and what you consider Puerto Rican. And I think it really just ends up in how you behave, because I can't realize a whole group of people like Puerto Ricans by just the minority that I don't like, that are the ones that are, well, I don't know if they're a minority, but like the ones that I don't like, which are the ones that are assimilated completely, the ones that really don't have that behavior, and that's just the way that makes you Puerto Rican, that culture really, because culture is more than just salsa and music, it's really just how you see things. Like for example, like the concept of family, like when you grew up in like a Protestant mindset like the United States, you're more individualistic, and you're more just for yourself, and you can make money, you can share with your family, but then that's for yourself. But in contrast with like Catholic, like like cultural mentality, like in Latin America, we see that like you can stay with your family until you're 20 something. They don't care because you're part of the family. But 18 in the United States, you have to be out the door, and that's how, like, that's just that those mentalities do contrast and crash, because that's just how you are, and that influences a lot of things, that has a domino effect in your mentality and what you think is right or wrong. So to give you a short answer, I think is that those who are assimilated do really need to look at themselves and see like what they choose to be. Like, are you just, if you want to be an American by any means, that's how we see you anyways. But if you really feel like you want to be a Puerto Rican, and you really are part of this, and and you're just a Puerto Rican in the United States, and you're not a New Rican, then I would say like try your hardest and just go on full on it, because you can be in both places, I think. And that's the thing about the United States also, like like being an American, it means assimilating to the United States and leaving your identity behind in some ways. That's what the Irish did, that's what all like those European groups did. And that's what they like they forced into that general American Protestant Anglo-Saxon culture, and that's what the American culture is. But it's really all those Europeans coming to America and leaving those cultures behind, and just basing on those ideals. And that's what you do when you're raised and you consider yourself an American, you embrace those things because those are the things that are implemented into you. But then, that's, I can't blame you for that. Then you have to choose what you want to be and really what you want to be identified as and what you want people to respect you as.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I can definitely understand your point of view. I mean, I think that's a question a lot of us that are born here,
Mm-hmm.
immigrant parents, or even those that are second, third generation, we sometimes face, like, do we continue to identify with our parents or grandparents' country or culture, or do we just identify as American? Because, I mean, like you said, at the end of the day, we are influenced by the American culture. I have usually just identified as Dominican, but at the end of the day, I realize I'm by nationality, I'm American. And
Mm-hmm.
although I do partake in a lot of things of Dominican culture, there are also things that I have been influenced by that come from American culture. So in that aspect, I do recognize that I'm different than
Mm-hmm.
I was born and raised in the Dominican Republic. So I can see both sides. I can see the side that it has a lot to do with how you're raised, but I also see the side of some of us that are born here that think, well, your blood also has to do with that as well. So yeah, I mean, I can see where both sides are coming from. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the DNA, you can go all about going about DNA and how it influences your behavior, but um, when it comes down, I think, to practical sense, I think it shows otherwise, And I think with the example that I give you, a German being born in Mexico, and but that goes up to the person too, if they choose to adapt, if they choose to maybe hold on to their German ancestors, and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
it's complicated, and it's hard. I when I try to think about it and try to put myself in your position, and people like you, it's hard. And I saw it when I lived in the United States. I lived in the southern region, so I had an interaction with Mexican Americans, and they had the same conflict. They're like, "Well, am I a Chicano? And the Chicano identity is real? And like, or am I just a Mexican? Am I just an American? Well, the Mexicans treat me like an American. The American treats me like a Mexican. What do I do? Where am I?" And it's complicated. I'm not going to say it's easy, but from our perspective, I think that's the best guidance we can give, and just north that we are open. I think as a society we are open to accept other people, because we have said, like, there's a lot of Chinese people here, believe it or not. Don't ask. There's all, like, and that's a big sub ethnic group here, and they're accepted because they have their Chinese restaurants, they have the things, but they work with the culture, they assimilate and they work through it, and I think that a lot of, like, New Yorkers, and like, they do feel like they're Puerto Ricans, and they're just the fact that they are oppressed by the United States and they're a minority over there, they feel more identified, and they try to, like, just feel part of something, but then they fail to see, like, also our side to it, and that there's more to it, and that if you want to actually go through that, you have to put effort. And I don't think you can do it from the United States. You actually have to move here and try to, like, live and comprehend everything that's happening. Because I don't think you possibly can understand, like, growing up in New York, what's happening in the poorest towns of, like, Dominican Republic, where, like, the houses are made out of wood. It's just simply impossible. It's just like, you're not going to understand that. Like, for as much as you read and think, and listen to music, that's not going to come to you. It's something you have to live through. And, you know, I feel for you guys, and I think you guys, like, that's a very important decision that every person has to make for themselves.
Yeah, yeah, and that makes sense. I can respect that opinion. I'm sure a lot of the people that are born in these islands are probably feel the same way as you, and
Mm-hmm.
I can definitely see your side of your opinion
Yeah,
on.
of course.
Yeah. So, that was it for all of my questions. So I want to thank you again for allowing me to do this interview with you. You are so knowledgeable on all this stuff. So I can only imagine you spent a lot of time reading and looking up all of this history. And would you ever consider maybe doing videos in English for your channel or for your podcast?
I've thought about it. I honestly thought about it. I'm not sure how I feel about it just yet, because of the same reason. Like, if you because the people from, like, the United States, like, yeah, but what about, the people who speak Spanish? Like, well, make the effort, learn Spanish. But That's how I see it. That's it's practical, and I can defend myself in English, and I can do it in English too. But I think that that's something that will go kind of against the philosophy that I have towards it.
Gotcha. Okay, and that's fine. That's
I mean, I'm always open to come to your channel or to anybody speak English, and always share my knowledge in English. But my content will always be in Spanish.
okay. Gotcha. So for any of you out there that speak Spanish and want to learn more about, Puerto Rican history and culture and stuff, definitely check out La Clara Podcast channel. So thank everyone for watching. Again, check out his channel, give this video a thumbs up, leave any comments down below, any questions that you may have for La Clara Podcast. And I'll check you guys in my next video. And thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.